Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
Have you noticed something strange happening lately? Everywhere you look, on social media, in comment sections, in late-night conversations between strangers, people are talking about the same mysterious experience. They say they met someone and nothing in their life was ever the same again. Not just a relationship, not just attraction, but something deeper, something that feels almost impossible to explain. They describe meeting a person who feels instantly familiar, as if they've known them for lifetimes. Someone who seems to mirror their deepest fears, their hidden wounds, and their greatest potential. And when they try to walk away, life somehow keeps bringing them back to the same realization. This connection is different. For many, the word that eventually appears in their search bar is the same: twin flame. But here's the question that many people are starting to ask. Why now? Why does it feel like suddenly thousands, maybe even millions, of people are discovering the concept of twin flames at the same time? Just 10 or 15 years ago, very few people had even heard this term. The idea existed mostly in small spiritual circles, ancient mystical teachings, or obscure books that only a handful of seekers ever found. Yet today, the conversation seems to be everywhere. People from completely different countries, different cultures, different backgrounds are describing experiences that sound almost identical. They talk about overwhelming recognition the moment they met. They talk about intense emotional transformation. They talk about separation, healing, and a strange inner pull that never fully disappears. Some say they started seeing repeating numbers everywhere: 1111, 222, 717. Others say meeting this person triggered a complete awakening in their life. They changed careers. They moved to new places. They began questioning everything they once believed about love, identity, and purpose. For many people, the twin flame journey doesn't begin with romance. It begins with disruption. A life that once felt predictable suddenly starts falling apart. Old relationships end. Friendships shift. Long-buried emotions rise to the surface. At first, it can feel chaotic. But eventually many people start to notice something strange. This chaos seems to have a direction. Almost as if life itself is pushing them toward a deeper version of who they are meant to become. And this is where a fascinating idea begins to emerge, one that many spiritual teachers and researchers of consciousness have been discussing for years. What if this isn't just happening to individuals? What if something larger is unfolding? What if humanity itself is going through a kind of awakening? Some people call it a collective awakening. The idea is simple, but powerful. Human consciousness is evolving. For centuries, most of society focused on survival, structure, and stability. People followed predictable life paths: education, career, marriage, routine. But in recent decades, something has started to shift. More and more people are asking deeper questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Is there more to life than what I was taught? Why do some connections feel destined? Why do certain encounters change everything? These questions were once considered philosophical or even impractical. But today, they are becoming part of everyday conversation. Meditation apps are downloaded by millions. Spiritual teachings that were once hidden in ancient texts are now discussed openly online. Psychology, neuroscience, and spirituality are beginning to overlap in ways that would have seemed impossible just a generation ago. And in the middle of this global shift, many people believe the twin flame phenomenon is becoming more visible for a reason. Not because twin flames suddenly appeared, but because people are finally ready to recognize them. Think about it for a moment. Imagine living hundreds of years ago. If you had experienced a connection so intense that it shattered your understanding of love, who would you talk to about it? Most likely no one. There would be no forums, no videos, no communities where people could share similar experiences. You might simply assume that what you felt was strange, confusing, or even something you should forget. But today, the situation is completely different. Someone experiences an overwhelming connection they cannot explain. They go online. They type a few words into a search bar. Why do I feel like I've known someone forever? Why can't I forget this person? Why did meeting them change my entire life? And suddenly they find thousands of people describing the exact same thing. Stories from people in different countries, different languages, different belief systems. Yet the emotional patterns are almost identical. Recognition, intense connection, sudden separation, deep inner transformation, and eventually a journey of healing and self-discovery. This shared recognition is powerful because when one person speaks their truth, others begin to realize they are not alone. In fact, many people who once thought they were going crazy suddenly understand that their experience may be part of a larger spiritual pattern. But the story goes even deeper than awareness. Many spiritual perspectives suggest that twin flames appear during times of major planetary transition, moments in history when humanity is forced to grow, moments when old systems begin to break down and new ways of thinking start to emerge. Look around the world today. Change is happening everywhere. Technology is reshaping how we live. Traditional career paths are shifting. Old definitions of relationships are evolving. More people are prioritizing emotional healing, authenticity, and purpose rather than simply following societal expectations. In times like this, intense soul connections may act as catalysts. They shake people awake. They challenge illusions. They force individuals to confront the parts of themselves they have avoided for years. Sometimes this awakening is beautiful. Sometimes it is painful. But almost always, it leads to transformation. And this might explain why so many people are suddenly discovering the twin flame journey. Because the journey itself is not really about another person. It is about awakening to yourself. The other person simply becomes the mirror. A mirror that reflects both your light and your shadows, your highest potential, and your deepest wounds. And when enough individuals begin to go through this transformation, something remarkable starts to happen. Individual awakening slowly becomes collective awakening. One person heals, then another, until a larger shift in consciousness begins to ripple outward. So perhaps the real question is not just, why are more people meeting their twin flame? Maybe the deeper question is this: what is humanity waking up to? Because if these connections truly are catalysts for growth, for healing, for spiritual evolution, then the rise of the twin flame journey might not be random at all. It might be a sign that something profound is happening on our planet. Something subtle, something invisible, but something powerful enough to change the way we understand love, connection, and the purpose of our lives. And if that's true, then the people experiencing these connections today may be standing at the very edge of a much bigger story. A story that is only just beginning to unfold. Not long ago, the phrase twin flame was almost unheard of. If you had asked people about it 10 or 20 years ago, most would have looked at you with confusion. Some might have guessed it was a poetic way of describing soulmates. Others might have assumed it belonged to mythology or mystical traditions. But very few would have understood the deeper meaning behind the concept. In fact, for a long time, discussions about twin flames existed only in small spiritual communities. These were groups of seekers who spent years studying ancient philosophies, metaphysics, and the nature of consciousness. For them, the idea was not new. Some believed the concept could be traced back to ancient philosophical traditions. In certain mystical interpretations of human existence, the soul was thought to originate from a unified source and later experience separation as part of its evolutionary journey. Within these traditions, the idea of two souls sharing the same spiritual origin was sometimes described metaphorically as two flames emerging from the same fire, separate in form, but connected at the deepest energetic level. However, even within spiritual circles, the concept was rarely discussed openly. Why? Because experiences connected to twin flames are often intense, confusing, and difficult to explain using ordinary language. Imagine trying to describe a connection that feels both familiar and completely new. A connection where the other person seems to understand you without explanation. A connection that simultaneously brings immense love and deep emotional challenges. To many people, such experiences sound almost unbelievable. For centuries, most individuals who went through these kinds of encounters had no framework to understand them. They might have interpreted the experience as destiny, divine intervention, or simply an unusually powerful relationship. Some wrote about it in poetry. Others turned it into mythology or spiritual allegories. But very few had the vocabulary to describe what many now call the twin flame journey. That is why, for most of history, these experiences remained hidden inside personal stories rather than collective understanding. But something began to change in the modern world. Slowly at first, then all at once. The internet transformed how human beings share experiences. Before digital communication existed, people were limited by geography. If you lived in a small town or a conservative culture, you might never encounter anyone who had gone through the same spiritual awakening as you. Your story might remain private forever. But today, the situation is dramatically different. A person can live in one country, speak one language, and still instantly connect with someone thousands of miles away who has experienced something remarkably similar. This shift has had a profound impact on how spiritual phenomena are understood. The twin flame journey is one of the clearest examples. Consider what often happens when someone first encounters their supposed twin flame. At the beginning, they usually don't know the term. They simply know that something extraordinary has happened. They meet someone. The connection is immediate. Conversations feel effortless, as if both people are speaking from the same emotional frequency. There is often an uncanny sense of familiarity. Some people describe it as feeling like coming home. Others say it feels like recognizing a part of themselves reflected in another human being. But along with the beauty of that connection often comes confusion, because the intensity can be overwhelming. Emotions rise quickly. Old wounds surface. And sometimes the relationship moves through unexpected cycles of closeness and distance. This is the moment when many people begin searching for answers. Late at night, they open their laptop or phone and start typing questions. Why do I feel spiritually connected to someone? Why does this person trigger my deepest emotions? Why can't I forget them even after separation? And somewhere within those searches, the same phrase begins to appear. Twin flame. At first, the idea can feel shocking. Some people immediately resonate with the concept. Others reject it completely. After all, the modern world has trained us to be skeptical of anything that sounds mystical or spiritual. But curiosity is powerful. So people continue reading. They watch videos. They listen to others sharing their experiences. And gradually, a strange realization begins to form. The patterns are incredibly similar. People from completely different backgrounds describe almost identical emotional stages. They talk about the initial recognition. They talk about the intensity of the bond. They talk about sudden separations that force both individuals to confront unresolved emotional wounds. And most importantly, they talk about transformation. Because one of the most consistent themes in the twin flame journey is personal growth. Whether the relationship continues or not, those who go through the experience often emerge with a deeper understanding of themselves. They begin healing old trauma. They start questioning limiting beliefs. They pursue passions and life paths they once ignored. In many cases, meeting a twin flame becomes the catalyst for a complete life transformation. This is why the concept has spread so quickly in recent years. Not simply because people are curious about spiritual relationships, but because many individuals recognize their own life experiences within the stories being shared. And when enough people begin recognizing the same patterns, what once seemed rare begins to feel like a collective phenomenon. However, it is important to understand something crucial. The growing conversation about twin flames does not necessarily mean that these connections are suddenly appearing more frequently than before. It may simply mean that humanity finally has the tools to recognize and discuss them. In the past, Thousands of people may have experienced these connections silently. Today, those experiences are being documented, shared, and discussed on a global scale. And that collective storytelling is powerful, because stories shape understanding. When someone shares their journey publicly, they create a mirror for others who may still be confused about their own experience. A person watching a video late at night might suddenly realize, that's exactly what happened to me. And in that moment, something shifts. Isolation turns into recognition. Confusion turns into curiosity. And curiosity often leads to deeper exploration. This is how spiritual ideas move from the margins of society into mainstream awareness. At first, only a few people speak about them. Then a small community forms. Then conversations expand. Eventually, what once seemed mysterious becomes part of a larger cultural dialogue. We have seen this happen with many ideas throughout history: meditation, mindfulness, emotional healing, and even the concept of energy itself. The twin flame journey may simply be the next step in that expanding conversation about human consciousness. And yet, the question still remains. If this phenomenon is becoming more visible today, if more people are recognizing these powerful connections, then what does that say about the direction humanity is moving toward? Are we simply discovering a new language to describe ancient experiences? Or are we entering a period where deeper spiritual connections are becoming an essential part of human evolution? To answer that question, we need to look beyond the stories themselves. We need to explore something even bigger. The possibility that the rise of twin flame awareness is connected to a larger transformation happening within the collective consciousness of our world. And that is where the journey becomes even more fascinating. Something subtle has been happening across the world. It's not something you can easily measure with instruments. It doesn't appear clearly in news headlines. And yet, millions of people feel it in their personal lives. A growing sense that something inside humanity is changing. People who once followed predictable paths suddenly begin asking deeper questions. Questions they may have never considered before. Why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? Why do certain people enter my life at the exact moment everything begins to shift? These questions are no longer limited to philosophers, monks, or spiritual teachers. Today they are being asked by students, entrepreneurs, engineers, artists, parents, people from every possible background. It is as if the entire world is slowly waking up from a long period of unconscious living. Many spiritual traditions refer to this process as collective awakening. The idea is both simple and profound. Just as an individual can experience moments of realization, moments where their perception of life suddenly expands, humanity itself may also go through phases of awakening. Periods where awareness grows not just within a single person, but across entire societies. To understand this, imagine consciousness like a vast ocean. Each human mind is like a wave moving across its surface. For a long time, each wave believes it is completely separate. It moves independently, reacting only to its immediate environment. But eventually, the wave begins to realize something extraordinary. It is not separate from the ocean. It is the ocean. In the same way, humanity may be beginning to recognize that our lives are deeply interconnected. This realization is appearing in many different forms. In science, researchers are studying how emotions, thoughts, and behaviors spread through social networks like invisible currents. In psychology, therapists increasingly focus on healing generational trauma, recognizing that the pain experienced by one generation can influence the emotional patterns of the next. In spirituality, people are rediscovering ancient teachings that describe consciousness as a shared field rather than an isolated experience. All of these perspectives point toward the same possibility. Human awareness is expanding. And when awareness expands, the way we experience relationships also begins to change. For centuries, most relationships were shaped primarily by social structure and survival. People married within their communities. They followed cultural expectations. Love was often secondary to stability, tradition, or economic necessity. But today, something different is happening. More people are searching for relationships that feel deeply meaningful. They are no longer satisfied with connections that exist only on the surface. They want emotional truth, authenticity, growth. They want to feel understood at the level of the soul. And this shift in desire may be one reason why twin flame connections are becoming more visible. Because the twin flame journey does not allow people to stay asleep emotionally. When such a connection appears, it often acts like a lightning bolt. Suddenly, everything becomes more intense. Emotions become amplified. Hidden fears rise to the surface. Unhealed wounds demand attention. For many people, this experience is both beautiful and terrifying. On one hand, the connection can feel magical. Conversations flow effortlessly. There is a sense of recognition that goes beyond logic. On the other hand, the relationship often exposes parts of ourselves we have spent years trying to ignore. Our insecurities, our fears of abandonment, our patterns of self-protection. And this is precisely why twin flame connections are often described as catalysts for awakening. They do not simply offer comfort. They trigger transformation. Think of it like a mirror placed directly in front of your soul. Every part of your inner world becomes visible. The love you are capable of, the pain you still carry, the potential you have not yet fully expressed. Many people who encounter their twin flames say that the experience completely changed their life. Direction. Someone who once worked in a career they disliked suddenly feels compelled to pursue their true passion. Someone who spent years avoiding emotional healing begins therapy or spiritual practices. Someone who wants to find themselves by external success starts searching for inner fulfillment. From the outside, these changes may seem unrelated to the relationship itself. But for the person experiencing the journey, the connection was the spark that ignited everything. This is why the rise of twin flame awareness may be linked to the broader phenomenon of collective awakening. As more individuals begin questioning their lives, they become more receptive to experiences that push them toward deeper self-discovery. And twin flame connections are among the most powerful catalysts for that process. But collective awakening does not happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, often through periods of chaos and uncertainty. History shows that major shifts in human consciousness are rarely comfortable. Old systems break down. Long-held beliefs are challenged. People are forced to reconsider what they thought they knew about reality. We may be living through such a moment right now. Technology has connected the world in ways that were unimaginable just decades ago. Information spreads instantly across continents. Ideas that once took generations to circulate now move through society in a matter of hours. This rapid exchange of knowledge has accelerated the evolution of awareness. People are exposed to new philosophies, spiritual practices, and psychological insights at an unprecedented rate. As a result, the boundaries between science, spirituality, and personal experience are beginning to blur. Meditation is now studied in neuroscience laboratories. Energy healing practices are discussed alongside psychology. Ancient wisdom traditions are being reinterpreted through modern language. Within this expanding landscape of consciousness, the twin flame journey is gaining attention not simply as a romantic concept, but as a transformational experience. Many who go through it describe feeling as though their entire identity was reshaped. Their priorities shift. Their understanding of love changes. They begin to see relationships not just as emotional bonds, but as opportunities for growth and evolution. And when enough individuals undergo this kind of transformation, the effect spreads outward. Families change. Communities change. Cultural conversations change. This is how collective awakening gradually unfolds. One realization at a time. One healed wound at a time. One awakened individual at a time. So when people ask why more twin flame stories are appearing today, the answer may lie within this larger shift. Perhaps these connections are not increasing randomly. Perhaps they are appearing at a moment when humanity is ready to evolve into a deeper understanding of love and connection. A love that is not based only on comfort or attraction, but on transformation,
Growth.
and the courage to face the deepest parts of ourselves. If that is true, then the rise of twin flame awareness may be more than just a trend. It may be a reflection of humanity remembering something it had forgotten for a very long time. That love, at its highest level, is not simply about finding another person. It is about awakening the soul. And when enough souls awaken, the world itself begins to change. For most of human history, powerful spiritual experiences often remained hidden within individual lives. Someone might meet a person who changed them forever. A connection so intense it reshaped their understanding of love, destiny, and identity. But after the encounter ended, there was usually nowhere to take that experience. No community to explain it. No shared language to describe it. No confirmation that others had lived through something similar. People simply carried the mystery quietly within themselves. Some wrote poetry about it. Others turned their experience into art, music, or philosophy. But the deeper meaning behind those encounters often remained private, misunderstood, or forgotten over time. Now imagine living in a small village hundreds of years ago. You meet someone who feels strangely familiar the moment you see them. Conversations with them feel effortless, almost telepathic. Their presence awakens emotions inside you that you didn't even know existed. Then suddenly, the connection becomes complicated. Distance appears. Circumstances pull you apart. And the emotional intensity leaves you questioning everything you thought you understood about love.
Who could you talk to about this?
Your friends might say you are simply obsessed. Your family might tell you to move on. Society would likely interpret the experience as nothing more than a dramatic romance. Without a shared framework, the deeper spiritual dimension of the experience might never be recognized. For centuries, this was the reality for most people who encountered what we now call twin flame connections. The experience happened, but the understanding never fully formed. Then something extraordinary changed the structure of human communication. The internet appeared. At first, it was simply a tool for exchanging information. Emails, websites, and online forums allowed people to communicate faster than ever before. But over time, the internet evolved into something far more powerful. It became a global mirror for human experience. For the first time in history, millions of people could share their personal stories instantly with others across the world. A person in one country could describe a deeply emotional event, and within minutes, someone thousands of miles away might recognize their own life within that story. This transformation in communication has had a profound impact on spiritual awareness. Ideas that once circulated only in small philosophical circles can now reach millions of people in a
single day.
Meditation practices that were once taught only in monasteries are now downloaded as mobile apps. Ancient teachings about mindfulness, consciousness, and energy are being studied, not only by spiritual seekers but also by scientists, psychologists, and educators. Within this expanding exchange of ideas, the twin flame journey has found a global audience. Consider what often happens when someone begins experiencing the emotional intensity associated with a twin flame connection. At first, they feel confused. They cannot easily explain why one person has such a profound impact on their life. The connection seems deeper than ordinary attraction. Yet it may also include periods of distance, emotional triggers, or sudden separation that feel impossible to understand. In earlier generations, such confusion might have lasted a lifetime. But today, curiosity leads people to search for answers. They open their phone late at night and begin typing questions into a search engine. Why does meeting this person feel like destiny? Why do I feel spiritually connected to someone? Why can't I forget them even after we separated? Within seconds, they encounter articles, videos, podcasts, and personal stories describing experiences that sound remarkably familiar. Some of these stories introduce the concept of twin flames. Others describe similar emotional stages using different language. But the underlying pattern often feels the same. Recognition, intense emotional connection, transformation, separation, inner healing, and sometimes eventual reunion. For someone who has been carrying confusion about their experience, this discovery can be life-changing. Suddenly they realize they are not alone. Thousands of people across the world have described the same emotional journey. This shared recognition is powerful, because when people realize their experience is part of a larger pattern, something inside them begins to relax. The feeling of isolation fades. Curiosity replaces fear. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" they begin asking a different question. What is this experience trying to teach me? Online communities have played an important role in this shift. Across forums, comment sections, and discussion groups, people share their personal journeys with surprising honesty. They talk about the initial recognition they felt when meeting their twin flame. They talk about the emotional chaos that sometimes follows. They talk about the painful periods of separation that force both individuals to confront their deepest fears. But they also talk about growth, healing, spiritual awakening, the discovery of purpose. These shared stories create a kind of collective map for the journey. Someone at the beginning of the experience may read about a stage they have not yet reached. Someone in the middle of separation may find comfort in hearing from others who have already moved through similar challenges. And someone who has completed a major stage of healing may share their insights to help those who are still struggling. In this way, the internet has become something like an invisible bridge connecting people who are navigating the same spiritual path. But the influence of the internet goes even deeper than simple information sharing. It also amplifies awareness. When one person tells their story publicly, it can inspire others to recognize and share their own experiences. This creates a ripple effect. A single story becomes 10. 10 stories become hundreds. Hundreds become thousands. Eventually, what once seemed like a rare or mysterious experience begins to look like a widespread phenomenon. Of course, not every intense relationship is a twin flame connection, and the internet can sometimes blur the line between spiritual insight and romantic projection. But even with these challenges, the digital age has undeniably accelerated the conversation around spiritual relationships. For the first time in human history, people experiencing deep soul connections can compare their journeys across cultures and continents. A person in Asia can resonate with a story from Europe. Someone in North America can recognize their experience in a video created by someone in South America. Despite differences in language, culture, and belief systems, the emotional patterns often appear remarkably similar. This global sharing of experience may be one of the key reasons why twin flame awareness has expanded so rapidly, because awareness grows wherever stories are told. And in the digital age, stories travel faster than ever before. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of this phenomenon is not just the technology itself. It is the timing. Why did this conversation emerge precisely in an era when humanity is more connected than ever before? Why are so many people recognizing these spiritual connections at the same moment in history when communication has become global and instantaneous? Some believe this timing is not accidental. They suggest that the internet may have arrived exactly when humanity was ready to begin sharing deeper truths about consciousness and connection. In that sense, technology has not only connected our devices, it has connected our stories, our questions, our awakenings, and perhaps even our souls. If that is true, then the internet is more than just a tool for communication. It may be playing an unexpected role in the collective awakening of humanity. And within that awakening, the story of twin flames is only just beginning to be understood. There are moments in history when humanity feels as if it is standing on the edge of something new, not always something visible, not always something that can be measured in numbers or statistics, but something that can be felt, a subtle shift in the way people think, feel, and relate to one another. For many individuals walking the spiritual path, the growing awareness of twin flames is connected to a larger idea often described as an energetic shift happening on Earth. At first glance, this concept may sound abstract. What does it mean for the energy of a planet to change? And how could such a shift influence human relationships? To explore this idea, we need to step back and look at the relationship between human consciousness and the environment in which it exists. Every living organism responds to energy. Plants grow toward sunlight. Animals navigate using magnetic fields. Human bodies function through complex electrical signals traveling through the nervous system. Even our brains operate through patterns of electromagnetic activity. From a scientific perspective, energy is not something mystical. It is simply the foundation of physical reality. But many spiritual traditions suggest that beyond the measurable energies studied in physics, there are subtler layers of energy connected to consciousness itself. Ancient cultures across the world described these subtle forces using different names. In India, spiritual teachings referred to prana, the life force that flows through all living beings. In Chinese philosophy, the concept of qi described a vital energy that moves through the body and the natural world. Indigenous traditions spoke of spiritual currents connecting humans with the earth, the sky, and all forms of life. Despite cultural differences, these traditions shared a similar understanding. Human beings are not separate from the energetic environment around them. We are part of it. And if that environment changes, our internal experiences may also change. Today, many spiritual thinkers believe humanity is currently moving through a period of energetic transformation. They suggest that the frequency of human consciousness is gradually rising, not in a literal sense that can be measured with instruments, but in the sense that people are becoming more aware, more emotionally sensitive, and more spiritually curious than in previous generations. You can see hints of this shift in everyday life. More people are prioritizing mental health and emotional healing. Meditation and mindfulness practices have moved from obscure spiritual traditions into mainstream.
Culture.
Psychology and spirituality are increasingly intersecting, exploring how inner awareness shapes human behavior. Even the concept of empathy, the ability to feel and understand the emotions of others, is becoming a central topic in education, leadership, and social development. These changes suggest that humanity is beginning to value inner awareness as much as external achievement. And when inner awareness grows, relationships naturally begin to evolve as well. This is where the twin flame journey enters the conversation. If human consciousness is expanding, then people may become more capable of recognizing deeper energetic connections that might have gone unnoticed in the past. Imagine living in a world where survival was the primary concern. Food, shelter, and safety would dominate daily life. In such an environment, there would be little time or emotional space to explore the subtleties of soul connections or spiritual awakening. But as societies develop greater stability and access to information, individuals begin asking deeper questions. They look beyond survival and start searching for meaning, purpose, authenticity, and in that search, they may become more open to experiences that challenge their understanding of reality. Meeting a twin flame often does exactly that. For many people, the encounter feels almost electric. The moment they meet, something shifts inside them. They feel seen in a way they have never experienced before. Conversations flow effortlessly. Silences feel comfortable rather than awkward. And sometimes there is an uncanny sense of familiarity, as if the two people already understand each other at a level beyond words. Some individuals describe this sensation as a powerful energetic resonance, almost like two musical notes vibrating at the same frequency. When those frequencies align, the connection feels natural and magnetic. But just as two mirrors reflecting each other can reveal every detail, the twin flame connection also exposes hidden emotional patterns. Old wounds begin to surface. Fears of abandonment, rejection, or vulnerability become impossible to ignore. For many people, this emotional intensity is both the most beautiful and the most difficult part of the journey, because the connection forces them to confront parts of themselves they may have avoided for years. And this is precisely why some spiritual perspectives suggest that twin flames appear during times of planetary transformation. They act as catalysts for personal awakening. They accelerate emotional healing. They push individuals toward authenticity. If enough people undergo this kind of transformation simultaneously, the effect may ripple outward through society. Think about how one awakened individual can influence others. Someone who heals their own emotional patterns often creates healthier relationships with friends, family, and colleagues. Someone who discovers their life purpose may inspire others to pursue their passions as well. Someone who learns to love themselves deeply may begin spreading compassion and empathy in ways that change the emotional atmosphere around them. When many individuals begin making these changes at the same time, the collective environment shifts. Gradually, the culture itself begins to evolve. This may be one of the reasons why conversations about twin flames, spiritual awakening, and conscious relationships are becoming more common today. People are no longer satisfied with relationships based only on social expectations. They are searching for connections that help them grow, connections that encourage truth, vulnerability, and emotional evolution. Of course, not everyone interprets these experiences through the language of energy or spirituality. Some psychologists describe the twin flame journey as a process of deep emotional mirroring. Others view it as an intense catalyst for personal development. But regardless of the explanation, one pattern remains consistent. When people encounter these powerful connections, their lives rarely remain the same. They begin to question old habits. They explore their inner world. They seek healing and transformation. And perhaps most importantly, they begin to recognize that love is not simply about finding comfort. It is about becoming more conscious, more authentic, more aligned with the deepest truth of who they are. If humanity truly is moving through a period of energetic transformation, then these experiences may be part of that larger shift. The rise of twin flame awareness may not just be about romantic destiny. It may be about awakening the human heart, helping people reconnect with themselves, and reminding us that the most powerful energy in the universe may not be technology, wealth, or status. It may simply be love, not the kind of love that stays comfortable and predictable, but the kind that awakens the soul and transforms everything it touches. When most people first hear the term twin flame, their minds immediately go to one idea: romantic love. It's an understandable assumption. After all, stories about soul connections often sound like the ultimate love story: two people destined to find each other, overcome every obstacle, and live happily ever after. But anyone who has actually experienced a twin flame connection will often tell you something very different. Yes, there can be powerful love. Yes, the attraction can be undeniable. But the twin flame journey is rarely simple, and it is almost never just about romance. In fact, many people discover that the romantic aspect is only the surface of something much deeper. The real purpose of the connection is transformation. To understand why, imagine looking into a mirror that reflects not just your physical appearance, but your entire inner world. Every strength, every insecurity, every unresolved emotional wound, every hidden potential you have not yet embraced. Now imagine that mirror appearing in the form of another human being, someone who seems to understand you without explanation, someone who sees parts of you that others never noticed, someone whose presence awakens both your highest joy and your deepest fears. That is often what the twin flame connection feels like. It is not just a meeting between two personalities. It is a meeting between two souls that reflect each other with extraordinary clarity. And when that reflection happens, something inside you begins to change. At first, the experience can feel magical. Many people describe the initial phase as a period of intense connection and emotional recognition. Conversations flow effortlessly. Time seems to disappear when they are together. There is a sense of familiarity that is difficult to explain logically. Some people even say it feels like remembering someone rather than meeting them for the first time. This stage is often called the recognition phase. But the journey rarely stays in that peaceful space for long. Because once the connection activates, deeper emotional layers begin to surface. Patterns that were previously hidden suddenly become visible. One person may struggle with vulnerability. The other may struggle with trust. Old fears of rejection or abandonment may rise unexpectedly. And this is where the journey begins to challenge the traditional idea of romance. Because instead of simply providing comfort, the connection starts triggering growth. Imagine a relationship where every unresolved emotional pattern becomes impossible to ignore. A relationship where avoidance no longer works. Where every moment of distance forces you to look deeper into yourself. For many people, this phase is incredibly difficult. It can feel confusing and overwhelming. One moment the connection feels incredibly close. The next moment circumstances create distance or separation. This is why the twin flame journey is often described through the dynamic of runner and chaser. One person feels overwhelmed by the emotional intensity and begins to pull away. The other person feels the connection deeply and tries to understand why it suddenly changed. From the outside, this can look like a complicated relationship. But from a deeper perspective, something else is happening. Both individuals are being pushed toward self-awareness. The runner is often forced to confront the fears that cause them to withdraw. The chaser is often pushed to confront their own attachment patterns and learn emotional independence. Over time, both individuals are encouraged to grow into more balanced, self-aware versions of themselves. And this is why many spiritual teachers emphasize an important truth about the twin flame journey. The ultimate goal is not simply union with another person. The real goal is union with yourself. Because when two people depend entirely on each other for emotional completion, the relationship can become unstable. But when each person learns to heal their wounds, discover their purpose, and stand confidently in their own identity, something remarkable begins to happen. The connection transforms. Instead of being driven by need, it becomes rooted in authenticity. Instead of seeking validation, both individuals learn to express love freely. And whether the two people remain together or continue their lives separately, the transformation they experienced becomes permanent. This is why so many people say that meeting their twin flame changed the direction of their life. Some leave careers that no longer feel meaningful. Others begin spiritual practices they never considered before. Some reconnect with creative passions that had been buried for years. The encounter becomes a turning point, a moment that pushes them toward a more authentic version of themselves. In many ways, the twin flame connection acts like a spiritual accelerator. Lessons that might normally take decades to learn suddenly appear within a few years. Emotional healing that might have remained unconscious becomes impossible to ignore. And through that intense process, people begin discovering who they truly are beneath all the roles and expectations they once carried. This is why the idea that twin flames are simply the perfect romantic partner can be misleading. In reality, the journey often involves periods of deep challenge. But those challenges serve a purpose. They break down illusions. They reveal hidden emotional patterns. They encourage growth that might never have happened otherwise. If we look at it from a broader perspective, the twin flame journey may not be about finding someone who completes you. It may be about finding someone who awakens you. Someone whose presence activates parts of your soul that were waiting to emerge. Someone who pushes you towards self-discovery, even when the process feels uncomfortable. And when enough individuals experience that kind of awakening, something larger begins to unfold. People who have gone through deep personal transformation often begin helping others heal. They share their insights. They create communities. They contribute to a culture that values emotional awareness and spiritual growth. In this way, the twin flame journey becomes part of a larger evolution of human consciousness. Not just a story about two people falling in love, but a story about how love itself can act as a catalyst for awakening. Because at its highest level, love does not simply make life comfortable. It reveals the truth of who we are. It invites us to grow beyond fear. And sometimes, through the mirror of another soul, it shows us the path back to ourselves. For many people, the concept of twin flames can sound abstract at first. It is often described using spiritual language, awakening energy, soul connections, divine timing. While these ideas are meaningful to those who resonate with them, they can still feel distant or theoretical to someone hearing about them for the first time. But everything changes when we look at the real experiences of people who believe they have walked this journey. Because the most striking aspect of twin flame stories is not the romantic intensity. It is the transformation that follows. Across different cultures, different countries, and completely different life situations, people describe a similar pattern. Before the encounter, life moves along a familiar path. There are routines, expectations, and long-term plans. Then suddenly, someone enters their life, and everything begins to change. Let's look at a few examples that illustrate how powerful this transformation can be. The career awakening. Daniel had spent nearly 15 years building a successful career in finance. From the outside, his life looked ideal. He had a stable income, a respected position, and the kind of professional security that many people spend decades trying to achieve. But internally, something always felt missing. He woke up every morning with a quiet sense of emptiness, a feeling that his life was moving in a direction he had chosen out of practicality rather than passion. Still, he continued on the same path, until he met someone who changed everything. The connection was immediate. Conversations between them felt effortless, almost as if they had known each other for years. They could speak about life, fears, dreams, and personal struggles with a level of honesty that surprised them both. But what Daniel did not expect was how much the relationship would force him to look inward. His twin flame often asked simple questions that lingered in his mind long after their conversations ended. What do you actually want to do with your life? If money didn't matter, what would you choose? At first, Daniel brushed these questions aside. But the more he thought about them, the more he realized he had been avoiding them for years. Eventually, the emotional intensity of the connection triggered a deeper realization. He was living someone else's version of success. Within 2 years, Daniel made a decision that shocked many people around him. He left his corporate career. He began studying psychology and emotional wellness, subjects he had always been fascinated by but never believed were practical career paths. Today, he works as a coach helping others navigate life transitions. When he reflects on the turning point in his life, he often says the same thing. Meeting her didn't just change my relationship life. It forced me to meet myself. The emotional healing journey. Sophia's story is very different, but the transformation is just as profound. Growing up, she experienced several painful relationships that left her deeply guarded. By the time she reached her late 20s, she had learned how to protect herself emotionally. She avoided vulnerability. She kept relationships casual. And whenever someone tried to get too close, she found ways to distance herself. For years, this strategy worked. Then she met someone who seemed to bypass all of those defenses without even trying. Their connection felt natural, almost peaceful. For the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to be emotionally open. But as the relationship deepened, something unexpected happened. Old wounds began to surface. Memories from past relationships. Childhood experiences she had never fully processed. Feelings of abandonment she thought she had already overcome. The intensity of these emotions confused her. Why would a connection that felt so loving suddenly bring so much pain to the surface? Eventually, she began exploring the idea that the relationship was acting like a mirror. Instead of creating the pain, it was revealing the emotional patterns that had been hidden inside her for years. This realization led Sophia to begin therapy and personal healing work. She spent months confronting the fears and insecurities she had once buried. The process was not easy. But through that work, something remarkable happened. She developed a deeper relationship with herself. She learned to recognize her emotional triggers. She built a sense of self-worth that no longer depended on another person's approval. And although her twin flame connection eventually moved into a period of separation, Sophia often says that the healing she experienced during that time changed her life forever. I used to think love meant finding someone who would never hurt me, she says. Now I understand that sometimes love shows you the places inside yourself that still need healing. The spiritual awakening. Marcus had never considered himself a spiritual person. He was analytical, practical, and deeply focused on logic. Meditation, energy, healing, and spiritual awakening were topics he usually dismissed as unrealistic or exaggerated. Then he experienced something he could not explain. When he met the woman he later believed to be his twin flame, he noticed a series of strange coincidences surrounding their connection.
They frequently had the same thoughts at the same time.
They would send messages simultaneously, sometimes typing the exact same words. On several occasions, Marcus felt as though he knew what she was going to say before she spoke. At first, he dismissed these moments as coincidence. But as they continued happening, he began questioning his assumptions about reality. Curiosity led him to explore subjects he had previously ignored. He started reading about consciousness. He experimented with meditation. He began paying attention to patterns and synchronicities that appeared in everyday life. Over time, his worldview expanded dramatically. Marcus did not abandon his logical thinking. Instead, he integrated it with a new curiosity about the nature of consciousness. Today, he describes his experience as a spiritual awakening, not because he suddenly adopted a belief system, but because the connection forced him to explore aspects of existence he had never considered before. The relationship didn't give me answers, he explains. It gave me better questions. A shared pattern. Stories like these appear again and again among people who believe they have encountered a twin flame connection. The details are different. The personalities are different. The life circumstances are different. But the underlying theme remains remarkably consistent. Meeting the other person becomes the catalyst for a personal transformation. Careers change. Emotional wounds heal. Spiritual awareness expands. Life paths shift in unexpected ways. This is why many people who walk the twin flame journey eventually reach an important realization. The most important part of the story is not the relationship itself. It is the transformation it inspires. Because long after the emotional intensity of the connection evolves or changes, the personal growth remains. The person who emerges from the journey is often stronger, more self-aware, and more aligned with their true purpose than before. And when enough individuals go through this kind of transformation, something remarkable begins to happen. Personal awakening slowly becomes collective awakening. One story inspires another. One healed person influences others. One life transformation creates ripples that extend far beyond the original relationship. Perhaps that is why so many twin flame stories are appearing today. Not because the journey is about romantic destiny alone, but because each transformation contributes to a larger shift happening within humanity. A shift toward greater awareness, greater authenticity, and a deeper understanding of what love truly means. When people begin exploring the idea of twin flames, one question often appears again and again. Why do so many of these connections seem to happen at the same time? Across different countries and cultures, people who have never met each other describe similar experiences during the same periods of their lives. They speak about sudden encounters that feel destined, intense emotional awakenings, and relationships that seem to catalyze profound inner transformation. At first glance, this pattern might seem like coincidence. After all, humanity is made up of billions of individuals living unique lives. It would be natural for some people to experience powerful relationships while others do not. But when thousands of people begin sharing similar stories during the same period of history, curiosity naturally grows. Is there a deeper pattern behind these experiences? Some spiritual perspectives suggest that twin flame meetings are not random events. Instead, they may be connected to a larger unfolding process often described as a collective soul mission. To understand this idea, imagine humanity as a vast network of interconnected lives. Each person follows their own path, making choices, forming relationships, and learning lessons throughout their lifetime. Yet beneath this individual journey, many traditions suggest there may be a deeper level of coordination within the evolution of human consciousness. In this view, certain individuals may be drawn together at specific moments in time not only for personal growth, but also to contribute to a larger transformation happening within the collective. The twin flame connection is often described as one of those catalysts. Rather than being a simple love story between two people, it may function as a kind of awakening mechanism. When two twin flames meet, the emotional intensity of the connection frequently accelerates personal transformation. Hidden fears surface. Unresolved wounds demand attention. Life directions shift in ways that might never have occurred otherwise. This rapid inner evolution can have far-reaching effects. A person who undergoes deep emotional healing may begin helping others heal. Someone who discovers their authentic life purpose may create work that inspires or supports many
people.
Someone who awakens spiritually may share insights that encourage others to question their assumptions about life and consciousness. In this way, the transformation triggered by a twin flame encounter does not remain confined to the relationship itself. It spreads outward. And when many individuals experience this kind of awakening during the same period of history, the cumulative effect may influence the broader direction of society. Think about how social change often begins. Rarely does it start with a single event that instantly transforms the entire world. Instead, change usually unfolds through the actions of many individuals who gradually shift cultural values, beliefs, and priorities. Consider how ideas such as mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and mental health awareness have expanded in recent decades. At one time, these topics were rarely discussed in public conversation. But as more individuals began exploring them, sharing their experiences, and applying them in their personal lives, those ideas slowly entered mainstream culture. Today, meditation is taught in schools, emotional intelligence is discussed in leadership training, and mental health awareness campaigns appear across media platforms. What began as individual exploration eventually became collective awareness. Some spiritual thinkers believe the twin flame phenomenon may be contributing to a similar shift, because the journey often pushes people toward deeper self-awareness. It encourages emotional healing, authenticity, and personal purpose. And when enough people move in that direction simultaneously, the collective consciousness of humanity begins to change. But why would these encounters happen at the same time? One explanation offered in spiritual traditions is the concept of soul timing. According to this perspective, souls may enter physical life with certain experiences planned as part of their growth and evolution. These experiences may include key relationships that activate important lessons or awaken deeper awareness. If many individuals are part of a shared evolutionary stage within humanity, it would make sense that their awakening experiences could occur during similar time periods. Just as flowers bloom during certain seasons, moments of spiritual recognition may unfold in waves. Some people believe we are currently living through one of those waves, a period where many individuals are being pushed toward greater consciousness and authenticity. In such a moment, intense soul connections like twin flames could play a powerful role, not because they guarantee romantic union or a specific life outcome, but because they accelerate inner growth. Another possibility is more psychological than spiritual. As awareness of deep emotional connections becomes more widely discussed, people may simply become more capable of recognizing and interpreting these experiences. In previous generations, someone might have felt a powerful connection but dismissed it as coincidence or infatuation. Today, the language surrounding spiritual relationships has expanded. People have frameworks like the twin flame concept that help them interpret intense emotional encounters. This does not necessarily mean the experiences themselves are new. It may simply mean that humanity now has the vocabulary to describe them. Yet regardless of whether one interprets these patterns through spirituality, psychology, or coincidence, one fact remains clear. Many people who experience these connections report similar outcomes. Their lives change. They begin asking deeper questions. They pursue healing, self-discovery, and purpose in ways they had never considered before. And as those personal transformations accumulate, society itself slowly begins to evolve. This brings us to an interesting thought. What if the timing of these encounters is not accidental? What if humanity is entering a period where emotional awareness, spiritual curiosity, and authentic connection are becoming essential parts of human development? If that is the case, then the rise of twin flame stories may be reflecting something much larger than individual relationships. It may be revealing a shift in the way people experience love itself. For centuries, love was often defined by social roles and practical expectations. Today, more people are seeking connections that challenge them to grow, to heal, and to become more conscious of their inner world. Twin flame connections, with all their intensity and transformation, may be one expression of that shift. And if many of these encounters are happening at the same time, perhaps it is because humanity itself is moving through a shared moment of awakening, a moment where love is no longer just about companionship. It becomes a path of transformation, a mirror for self-discovery, and a force powerful enough to change not only individual lives, but the collective future of humanity itself. For many people who first discover the idea of twin flames, the concept can sound beautiful, almost magical. Two souls recognizing each other, a connection that feels deeper than ordinary relationships, a bond that seems to exist beyond time, distance, or circumstance. But anyone who has actually walked this path knows something important. The twin flame journey is not easy. In fact, one of the most defining characteristics of the twin flame awakening is that it often begins with profound challenge. The intensity that makes the connection feel extraordinary is the same intensity that exposes everything inside us that is not yet healed. And this is why so many people describe the journey as both the most beautiful and the most difficult experience of their lives. To understand why, we need to look at what really happens when two people enter this type of connection. At the beginning, the encounter can feel almost effortless. Many people describe the first phase as a period of powerful recognition. They meet someone and immediately feel a sense of familiarity. Conversations flow naturally. There is often a deep emotional openness that appears very quickly. It can feel as if both people are seeing each other clearly for the first time in their lives. For a moment, everything seems perfectly aligned. But this phase rarely lasts forever. Because once the initial recognition settles, deeper emotional layers begin to surface. The connection acts like a mirror, reflecting parts of ourselves we may not fully understand yet. Insecurities appear. Old wounds resurface. Patterns that were once hidden become impossible to ignore. One person may struggle with fear of vulnerability. Another may struggle with fear of abandonment. One may fear losing independence. The other may fear losing connection. These emotional dynamics create tension inside the relationship, and that tension often leads to one of the most well-known stages of the twin flame journey, the runner and the chaser dynamic. In this stage, one person begins to withdraw. The intensity of the connection feels overwhelming, and the natural response is to create distance. This person is often referred to as the runner. Meanwhile, the other person feels the connection deeply and tries to understand why the relationship suddenly changed. They may attempt to repair the bond, communicate more, or search for answers. This person is often called the chaser. From the outside, this dynamic can look confusing or even unhealthy. Friends and family might say the relationship is simply unstable. But from the perspective of the twin flame journey, something more complex is happening. Both individuals are being pushed toward self-awareness. The runner is being forced to confront the fears that cause them to retreat. The chaser is being pushed to release emotional dependency and discover inner strength. In many ways, both roles represent different aspects of the same inner work: learning to face fear, learning to develop emotional balance, learning to grow independently rather than relying on the other person for identity or fulfillment. Eventually, many twin flame connections enter a period known as separation. This stage can be one of the most painful parts of the journey. The two individuals may go months or even years without contact. Sometimes the separation happens because circumstances make the relationship impossible at the time. Other times, The emotional intensity simply becomes too overwhelming for both people. For someone experiencing this stage, the silence can feel unbearable. Questions begin to arise. Why did this connection appear in my life only to disappear again? Why do I still feel connected to someone who is no longer present? Was the entire experience just an illusion? During this period, many people feel tempted to search constantly for signs that the relationship will return. They may analyze every message, every memory, every coincidence. But over time, the separation stage often reveals a deeper lesson. The journey was never meant to revolve entirely around the other person. It was meant to bring attention back to the self. This is the stage where true transformation begins. Without the constant presence of the connection, individuals are forced to focus on their own lives again. They begin healing emotional wounds. They rediscover passions and goals that had been neglected. They build a sense of self-worth that does not depend on the relationship. Some begin therapy or emotional healing work. Others explore meditation, spirituality, or personal development. Gradually, something remarkable begins to happen. The emotional chaos that once dominated their thoughts begins to quiet. The connection that once felt overwhelming becomes more peaceful. Instead of chasing the relationship, they begin building a life that feels meaningful and authentic on its own. And ironically, this is often the point where the energy of the connection shifts. Because when someone stops seeking validation from the other person, they become more balanced internally. They are no longer driven by fear or longing. They are simply living their life. Many spiritual interpretations of the twin flame journey suggest that this balance is essential before any form of reunion can occur. If two people meet while still carrying deep emotional wounds, the relationship will constantly trigger those wounds. But if both individuals grow independently and learn to heal themselves, the connection can evolve into something more stable and harmonious. Of course, not every twin flame journey ends with a physical reunion. Sometimes the transformation itself is the purpose. The encounter may have appeared only to awaken something inside both individuals, to redirect their lives toward healing, authenticity, and personal growth. And even without reunion, the lessons learned during the journey can shape the rest of a person's life. They become more self-aware, more emotionally mature, more capable of creating healthy relationships with others. This is why the challenges of the twin flame journey should not be misunderstood as failure. They are part of the awakening process. Every emotional trigger reveals something that needs healing. Every moment of distance encourages self-discovery. Every stage of the journey pushes individuals closer to understanding themselves. In many ways, the twin flame awakening resembles the process of spiritual growth itself. At first, it begins with inspiration and recognition. Then comes confusion and challenge. Finally, through patience and self-reflection, deeper wisdom begins to emerge. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson hidden within the journey. Love is not only about comfort and happiness. Sometimes love is the force that awakens us. The force that pushes us to confront our fears. The force that guides us toward the most authentic version of who we are meant to become. When viewed from this perspective, the challenges of the twin flame awakening are not obstacles. They are the path. A path that leads not just to another person, but to the deeper truth of the self.
Viết chi tiết chương 10 bằng tiếng Anh, viết dài hơn khoảng 1.000 từ.
Chapter 10. The Real Meaning of the Twin Flame Collective Awakening. There is a moment in many spiritual journeys when the questions finally begin to change. At the beginning, most people ask the same thing. When will we reunite? Will my twin flame come back? Why did they leave? But somewhere along the path, something subtle shifts. The question becomes something entirely different. Why did this connection awaken me? And this is where the deeper truth of the twin flame collective awakening begins to reveal itself. Because the real purpose of the twin flame journey was never only about romance. It was never only about reunion. It was about awakening. Not just for you,
Not just for them,
but for the collective consciousness of humanity. And this is why more people than ever before are encountering twin flame connections now. a global awakening of consciousness. For thousands of years, humanity has largely lived in survival mode. Societies were built around competition, hierarchy, control, and external validation. Success was measured through status, power, and accumulation. But something has begun to shift. Across the world, people are questioning the structures they once blindly followed. More individuals are asking deeper questions. Why do I feel empty even when I achieve everything society told me to want? Why do certain relationships awaken something profound inside me? Why do I feel drawn towards spiritual growth and self-healing? This awakening is happening everywhere. People are exploring meditation, energy healing, psychology, shadow work, and ancient spiritual traditions. Concepts that once existed only in small spiritual communities are now being discussed openly across social media, podcasts, and books. And within this larger wave of consciousness awakening, the twin flame connection has emerged as one of the most intense catalysts for transformation. But why now? Why are so many people suddenly discovering this phenomenon? The mirror effect. Why twin flames trigger awakening? The reason lies in what twin flames truly represent. Unlike ordinary relationships, twin flames act as mirrors of consciousness. They reflect back every part of you that has been hidden, denied, or suppressed. Your fears, your insecurities, your childhood wounds, your deepest desires. Meeting your twin flame is like standing in front of a mirror that reflects not only who you are but who you could become. This mirror effect creates an intense energetic reaction. Some people feel immediate recognition, as if they have known this person forever. Others experience overwhelming emotional activation, love, fear, longing, confusion, sometimes all at once. And often, this intensity triggers what many describe as a spiritual awakening. Suddenly, life no longer feels the same. Old priorities begin to fall away. Material success loses its grip, and the search for meaning becomes impossible to ignore. Why more people are experiencing it now? One explanation often discussed in spiritual communities is the idea that humanity is entering a new phase of consciousness. You might hear it described as the rise of collective awareness, the transition into higher vibration, the evolution of human consciousness. Whether you interpret this symbolically, psychologically, or spiritually, the pattern is undeniable. Across cultures and continents, people are reporting similar experiences. They meet someone who profoundly changes their life. The connection feels different from anything they have known before. It triggers both immense love and deep personal healing. And even if separation occurs, the transformation continues. This pattern is what many people identify as the twin flame journey, a story that reflects the collective. Consider the story of Daniel. For most of his life, Daniel was focused entirely on his career. He believed success meant financial stability, recognition, and building the perfect life on paper. Relationships came and went, but none truly challenged him emotionally. Then he met Maya. From the moment they met, something felt strange, almost unsettling. Their conversations were deeper than anything Daniel had experienced before. Maya seemed to understand parts of him he had never spoken aloud. But instead of feeling comfortable, Daniel felt exposed. Within months, their connection triggered intense emotional reactions. Old wounds from Daniel's childhood surfaced. His fear of vulnerability became impossible to hide. And eventually, overwhelmed by the intensity, Daniel did what many twin flame runners do. He left. For a while, life returned to normal. But something inside him had changed. He could no longer ignore the deeper questions about himself, about love, and about purpose. Over the next few years, Daniel began a journey of personal growth, therapy, meditation, spiritual exploration. Not because Maya demanded it, but because the connection had awakened something inside him. And this is the deeper truth of the twin flame dynamic. The awakening continues even in separation. The purpose beyond the relationship. When people first discover the concept of twin flames, they often focus entirely on reunion. They search for signs. They analyze synchronicities. They ask readers, psychics, and spiritual teachers the same question. Will we end up together? But the longer someone walks this path, the more the focus begins to change. Because the greatest transformation does not come from being with the twin flame. It comes from becoming the person the journey is shaping you to be. Twin flames act as catalysts. They initiate the awakening. But the real work happens within. Learning to heal. Learning to love without attachment. Learning to become emotionally whole. And when enough individuals begin doing this work, something extraordinary begins to happen. The awakening spreads. How individual awakening affects the collective. Human consciousness is not isolated. Every shift within an individual creates subtle ripples throughout the collective. When someone heals their trauma, they interact with the world differently. When someone learns unconditional love, they bring more compassion into their relationships. When someone discovers their purpose, they inspire others to search for their own. The twin flame journey accelerates this process because the emotional intensity forces individuals to confront their deepest wounds faster than most other life experiences. And when thousands or even millions of people undergo this transformation simultaneously, the effect becomes global. This is why the idea of a twin flame collective awakening resonates with so many people. It reflects a deeper pattern happening across humanity. The awakening is not always comfortable. However, awakening is rarely easy. In fact, it can be profoundly uncomfortable. Old beliefs collapse. Relationships that once felt stable may dissolve. Careers that once defined identity may suddenly feel meaningless. This is why many people initially resist the transformation triggered by their twin flame. They run from it. They deny it. They try to return to the familiar version of life they had before. But once the awakening has begun, it is difficult to reverse. Because awareness cannot be unseen, and growth cannot be undone. The question that changes everything. Eventually, most people on this journey arrive at a powerful realization. The connection was never meant to control their life. It was meant to awaken it. And when that realization arrives, the obsession with reunion begins to soften. Instead of asking, "How do I get them back?" the question becomes, "Who am I becoming through this experience?" This shift is the true beginning of spiritual maturity within the twin flame journey. Because the goal is no longer to chase love. It is to embody it, the deeper meaning of the collective awakening. So, why are more people meeting their twin flames now? Perhaps the answer is simpler than we imagine. Humanity is ready. Ready to question old patterns. Ready to heal generational wounds. Ready to redefine what love truly means. Twin flame connections are not here to create fairy tales. They are here to accelerate awakening, to push individuals toward deeper self-awareness, and ultimately, to help humanity rediscover something it has long forgotten. That love is not something we chase. It is something we become. If you are experiencing the twin flame journey, you may sometimes feel confused, overwhelmed, or even lost. But perhaps the most important question is not whether reunion will happen. Perhaps the more powerful question is this: what part of you is being awakened right now? Because every challenge, every moment of longing, and every stage of healing is shaping you into someone new. Someone more aware, more compassionate, more aligned with your true self. And when enough individuals walk this path of awakening, something remarkable begins to happen. The world itself begins to change. Maybe the rise of twin flame connections is not a coincidence. Maybe it is a sign that humanity is remembering something ancient, something powerful, something we once knew long ago. That love, real love, is not just a relationship. It is a transformation. And perhaps, through these intense and mysterious connections, humanity is slowly learning how to awaken together. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. What lessons has your twin flame connection brought into your life? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help someone else understand their own awakening. And if you want to explore more insights about the twin flame journey, spiritual awakening, and conscious relationships, don't forget to subscribe and join this growing community of seekers discovering the deeper meaning of love.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.